One pearl is better than a whole necklace of potatoes. Etienne de Crowe. Well-crafted prose depends on the writer's ability to distinguish between pearls and potatoes. Only some words are fit to be strung into a given sentence. So speaks Constance Hale, author of Sin and Syntax: How to Craft Wicked Good Prose. For Hale, the careful execution of beautiful, powerful prose through beautiful, powerful words is guided by 5 principles. Number 1, relish every word. True prose stylists carry on an impassioned, lifelong love affair with words, banishing mediocre ones like so many uninteresting suitors, burnishing the good ones till they shimmer. Be infatuated, be seduced, be obsessed. How can you know you've written words worthy of reading? Once you've committed your words to paper or to the screen, test each term. Does it carry your idea? Does it express exactly that once inchoate thought? Now we have to take a couple of things into consideration with our word choices. Number 1 is the denotation, or the dictionary definition of the word. Number 2 is the connotation, the suggestive power of a word. Its latent, implicit, emotionally laden meanings. The denotation of the word fat, for instance, from a strictly scientific viewpoint, is a cell that stores energy. But if you call someone fat, you're saying a little more than, hey, you're storing some extra energy there. Be nice, kids. Beyond the sense of a word is its sensuousness, its sound, its cadence, its spirit. How a word sounds can be almost as important as what it means. This is especially true for poetry, but it's often also the case for prose. The musicality of the language adds impact to the images that you're creating in your reader's mind. Fall in love with words and use them with care. Number 2, aim deep, but be simple. Verbose is not a synonym for literary. Amen. Pretentious purple prose is the bane of the English teacher's existence. I read so much writing that tries so hard to sound important while saying so much nothing. Please, pretty please, get rid of redundant adverbs, awkward passive voice, unnecessary euphemisms, and big or unusual words that add nothing to these simple words they replace. It's not enough, though, just to be simple. Don't cut words just to cut them. Don't simplify language to the point that you infantilize it. To eliminate expressive words in speaking or writing, words that intensify or vivify meaning, is not simplicity. It may be, or usually is, stupidity. Frank Lloyd Wright. If an unusual word or strange sentence construction clarifies or amplifies your meaning, or contributes to tone or characterization in a unique and specific way, by all means, keep it in. The point is, in revision especially, to choose your words with care. Communicate your meaning in the most effective way possible for your reader to get and feel what you're trying to say. It just so happens that the most effective way to communicate is often, though not always, the simplest. We could call this an application of Occam's razor. Per Hale, even the smallest words, loud or excited, Bermuda grass or flat-bladed grass, matter. Be picky. Number 3, take risks. After having suffered the hyperactive red pen of school marms and the hypercorrect rules of inflexible pedagogues, too many of us have retreated to the realm of the safe, the standard, the unimaginative. We stick to common words, or worse, pull out a hackneyed phrase. We yield to the conventions of a profession rather than pushing ourselves to be unconventional. We use jargon rather than coming up with original language. Ouch. Attacked right in the profession. But I get it. I do encourage my creative writing students to take risks and stretch themselves with their writing. But I have to teach my English students what proper grammar is supposed to be, if only so that they know how to break the rules in an intelligent and creative way. and not in a way that makes them look ignorant of the basic concepts of human communication. Now, grammar didn't come first, language came first. The grammar rules or guidelines that we've constructed for the language are just what we've drawn from the language that we use to help clarify meaning. Grammar's only real purpose is to clarify meaning and impact of the language. If a grammar rule doesn't work for you, if you can break it intelligently to better communicate what you're trying to say, break it. But it is a balancing act. The principle still holds. While we should know what the guidelines and conventions are and how to work within them when necessary, we also shouldn't fear going to the edge, playing around on the fringes. As Hale says, but it's romping on the fringes of language that gives writing its frisson. The right word may be snagged off the street, snatched from another language, or hatched in the sand tray of the imagination. This means play around with language. See what kind of new images and idea combinations you can come up with. What kind of sounds can you combine? Do you want to eschew your nemesis, avoid your bully, or tell the biggest B word on the block to get out of your face? Which way you choose to express the scene will dramatically affect how it impacts the audience. This little guy wants to join me. You want to be part of the video too? Of course you do. Don't shun slang, especially when it's vivid and musical and fills a gap in the lexicon. I'll offer a caveat for this one. Beware of how contemporary slang can be ephemeral. This is especially the case nowadays with Gen Z slang, which seems to change every 5 minutes. Using that kind of slang can quickly date your work. If your characters use an idiom that all the young folks are using today, when you draft your story, only for that idiom to be archaic when your story is finally published 6 months later, it's not a good look. But by all means, let all your characters, including even your nameless narrator, have their slang and use it when appropriate. A word not in the dictionary is not out of bounds. Yes, she's encouraging neologisms. And while I have some issue with these in student writing, in the hands of a writer deft with prose style and characterization, neologisms can give us wonderful additions to the dictionary, from snarky to snail mail. Even the bard himself, Shakespeare, gave us over 1,000 of these, from thin air to foul play. But that's all Greek to me. So, experiment away, and show me what you find on the fringes. While you're on the fringes, consider becoming a member of Creative Writing Corner. Click that join button down below to learn more. I am adding new content pretty soon here. I've been doing it as regularly as I possibly can. It only costs you a couple bucks a month. You get to support me. You get some extra videos along the way, and you can help me make more and better content, and I would appreciate it to the ends of the earth and back. Thank you so much to my current members. I'm trying to make sure to thank you guys down in the description. And again, click the join button, and back to the video. Number 4, seek beauty. Brevity isn't everything. Amen. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos on style, where I've pulled from Strunk & White's Elements of Style, from George Orwell's Politics in the English Language, from William Zinzer's On Writing Well, you might be under the impression that I am an advocate for brevity above anything else. I'm not. Some editors dumb down copy for mass audiences, preferring the short word to the long. I try not to be such an editor. I do encourage writers to check their overwriting impulses in revision, though. Shorter doesn't necessarily mean better in writing, but longer often does mean worse. But ultimately, I'm an advocate for finding the right words to say what you want to say. And this has to do with the how, the method of saying, as much as the what, the content, the sound of your language, of each word in isolation and of their combination with others, provides some of the beauty that adds resonance to your words. Sounds can make words sing. However, it's not just sound that gives a word beauty. It's also precision. Sometimes the longer, more unfamiliar word is the exact right word that you need, with the exact shades of meaning to clearly communicate your idea. In cases like that, go with the word that works best. Don't default to the simple for the sake of being simple. Instead, let your prose flow from your pen, make your writing musical and precise, look and listen for the beauty of your words and the way they interplay among themselves, and you'll grab your reader's attention and hold it tight. For inspiration, go on literary adventures with novelists like Juna Barnes, William Faulkner, Vladimir Nabokov, or Toni Morrison, none of whom uses the lowest common denominator diction. Of course, you can choose your own list of who you want to adventure with. Whose prose inspires the writer in you? For me, it's authors like Edgar Allan Poe, Mark Twain, Robert E. Howard, Ray Bradbury, Mickey Spillane, Ursula Le Guin, and Douglas Adams, to name just a few. I suppose I enjoy ideas, action, and irony in equal measure. But whenever I read something new that I enjoy, I try to read it like a writer, looking for what the author did that brought about that effect in me. I encourage everyone who would be a writer to fall in love with this skill and to practice it regularly. Principle number 5, find the right pitch. Prose is an intimate exchange between writer and reader. Always think about your reader. Hold your audience in your mind. Don't talk to readers as if they are strangers or as if they are beneath you. This leads us to pitch. In music, pitch has to do with how high or low a sound is within a given range. In writing, pitch may be thought of as tilt, slant, cant, spiel, delivery, or act of persuasion. It has to do with how a writer combines meaning, melody, and tone to touch a reader. So, great children's book authors tend to be masters of pitch, while authors of academic treatises tend to be tone-deaf incompetents with it. Tend to. Pompous phrasing often serves no purpose other than to puff up the speaker. But of course, the best academic writers impress us not just with their scholarship, but with their ability to find the right pitch. And pretentious diction is rife in many professions besides academia. Jargon, while often providing useful shorthand for one professional to talk to another, becomes useless when professionals attempt to communicate outside their little sphere. So, if you want to write eloquently as a professional, you need to do it with good words, universal words. Writing in the right pitch is about knowing your readers and putting yourself in their shoes while you write. To find the right pitch is to be human, to have a sense of the street, while still reaching for the lofty. It means resisting the kind of language that suits cogs in a machine better than sentient beings. All right, my writing friends, get out there and start writing. And while you do, don't forget to relish every word, aim deep but be simple, take risks, seek beauty, and find the right pitch. Put your takeaways in the comments below, and while you're down there, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. And until next time, good luck and good writing. Peace.